Good morning, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend and got out to enjoy the sunshine for a bit. Today we're going to take a bit of a diversion off our Scottish politics topic to move on to thinking about the USA topic just for a couple of sessions. And I want us to do this because there's a big issue in the news in America just now that I think it's really important you understand and you think about, not just for your National 5 Modern Studies, but because actually I think it's really important you think about this issue generally. And you've probably already seen this in the news. A week ago today, on the 25th of May in Minneapolis, which is a big city in Minnesota, a 46-year-old man, George Floyd, was killed in the street at the hands of a white police officer. The entire scene was filmed by witnesses, and the police officer has since been charged with murder.
Now, a sacked police officer has been charged with murder for his role in the death of an unarmed black man in the American city of Minneapolis that sparked days of unrest. A police station was set on fire overnight and officers have been firing tear gas and rubber bullets. Donald Trump tweeted that thugs were dishonoring George Floyd's memory, but Twitter accused him of glorifying violence with a post that said, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." Our North America correspondent Nick Bryant's report contains some distressing images.
Fires of fury, fires of frustration. Phrases from the civil unrest of the 1960s that apply once more in 2020 America. For the third night running, parts of Minneapolis were burning. This a police station overrun and set ablaze. For protesters, it had become a landmark of racial injustice. They believe that an unarmed African-American, George Floyd, was murdered by the police. To bolster this wall of Minneapolis local officers and to quell the protests and scattered looting, the state's Democratic governor sent in the National Guard. He called the unrest unacceptable, but recognized there was a lot of pain and anger.
I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. You just a grown, you're a tough guy.
This was the spark for America's latest racial firestorm. A white police officer filmed kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, despite him pleading he could not breathe. Tonight, the sacked police officer Derek Chauvin was charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. And this video, from a different angle, showed other officers also pinning George Floyd to the ground.
Protests started in the city and across the United States to campaign against police brutality and to highlight the ongoing problem of racism in America and the attacks that happen all too often on members of the black community. A week later, the protests are not only still going on, but they're spreading far and wide, and more examples of police brutality against protesters has been documented.
Another night of chaos and unrest as anger over police killings spread to every corner of the country. Penetrating the heart of political power in Washington, D.C., security agents used tear gas to push protesters away from the White House. New York's iconic streets were littered with the debris of rage over the death of George Floyd, but also giving vent to years of festering frustration with police mistreatment of African Americans. Here and in more than a dozen other cities, protesters and looters ignored curfews. Security forces rounded them up, fighting to restore order. Nearly a third of the arrests took place in Los Angeles. In Minneapolis, the National Guard moved with military precision to clear demonstrators away from a police station, firing tear gas and rubber bullets, setting up roadblocks throughout the city, shutting down movement. Security forces have been aggressively pushing back the protesters. They came determined to make sure that this night would be different than the others, to retake the streets. We've seen a real show of force here tonight.
Now, as you'll learn when we go through this unit in a bit more detail, America has a long history of racism and of inequality between ethnic groups, and we'll look at this in much more detail. But I think it's important just now, while all this is going on, that we stop and think about the current protests in America and understand what is driving people to come out onto the streets in such huge numbers. Many of you probably have never experienced racism directly, but it certainly exists, and you'll probably know someone who has experienced racism at some point in their life. And even if you don't have any direct experience of it, it matters. It matters a great deal that you learn about this and care about what is going on. Because one of the most important factors in discrimination of any kind, be it racism or anything else, is that people don't stand by and let it happen just because it doesn't affect them directly. So, today I want you to learn a bit more about what's going on with the current protests, with the current issues in America, and prepare a short report on what you've found out. I'm going to show you some short clips of black people explaining why they're protesting, and I want you to try and understand some of the underlying causes of these protests and why the murder of George Floyd is just the latest in a long line of factors affecting these communities in America. So, to begin with and to end this short video, I want to show you what I think is an incredibly powerful speech by the rapper Killer Mike, which is a really good explanation of why people find this issue so important and why people are moved to come out onto the streets in such huge numbers. So watch this clip and then go back to the team, and there'll be a wee bit of an explanation of the tasks I want you to work on today. Okay, have a good day. Bye.
I didn't want to come, and I don't want to be here. I'm the son of an Atlanta City police officer. My cousin is an Atlanta City police officer, and my other cousin, East Point police officer. And I got a lot of love and respect for police officers, down to the original 8 police officers in Atlanta that even after becoming police had to dress in a YMCA because white officers didn't want to get dressed. And here we are 80 years later. I watched a white officer assassinate a black man, and I know that tore your heart out. And I know it's crippling. And I have nothing positive to say in this moment because I don't want to be here. But I'm responsible to be here because it wasn't just Dr. King and people dressed nicely who marched and protested to progress this city and so many other cities. It was people like my grandmother, people like my aunts and uncles who were members of SCLC and NAACP, and in particular, Reverend James Orange, Mrs. Alice Johnson, and Reverend Love, who we just lost last year. So I'm duty bound to be here to simply say that it is your duty not to burn your own house down for anger with an enemy. It is your duty to fortify your own house so that you may be a house of refuge in times of organization. And now is the time to plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize. It is time to beat up prosecutors you don't like at the voting booth. It is time to hold mayoral offices accountable, chiefs and deputy chiefs. Atlanta is not perfect, but we're a lot better than we ever were, and we're a lot better than cities are. I'm mad as hell. I woke up wanting to see the world burn down yesterday because I'm tired of seeing black men die. He casually put his knee on a human being's neck for 9 minutes as he died like a zebra in the clutch of a lion's jaw. And we watch it like murder porn over and over again. So that's why children are burning to the ground. They don't know what else to do. And it is the responsibility of us to make this better right now. We don't want to see one officer charged. We want to see 4 officers prosecuted and sentenced. We don't want to see targets burning. We want to see the system that sets up for systemic racism burnt to the ground. And as I sit here in Georgia, home of Stevens, Georgia, former vice president of the Confederacy, white man said that law, fundamental law, stated that whites were naturally the superior race, and the Confederacy was built on a cornerstone It's called a cornerstone speech. Look it up. The cornerstone speech that blacks would always be subordinate. That officer believed that speech because he killed that man like an animal. In this city, officers have done horrendous things and they have been prosecuted. This city's cut different. In this city, you can find over 50 restaurants owned by black women. I didn't say minority, and I didn't say women of color. So after you burn down your own home, what do you have left but char and ash?